one of the most random matchups out of nowhere happened. Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint Dennis. Yeah, I knew he called him out, but fighters call out people all the time. We had Khalil Rountree calling out Alex Pereira. I doubt that fight will happen. But we had Benoit Saint Dennis, who is on a roll, as well as Khalil Rountree, and he gets the fight. And I'm surprised because Dustin Poirier doesn't really like fighting down that low. And in my opinion, this is a way too big step up for Benoit Saint Dennis. The right fight he should have took is a guy higher up. And you might say maybe a Gamrot, but I don't think Gamrot wants that, considering he was meant to be a backup fighter on the, what was the card? The Makhachev one for Volkanovski, and it didn't happen. So, we could have looked at maybe a Jalen Turner. You beat him, and you do a very good performance. Then you move down to a guy like Poirier, or someone like that. I just think this is not the right time, and his style is actually a bad matchup, in my opinion, for Dustin Poirier if he does what he usually does. Because if he goes out there and stays on the outside and looks to shoot him without blitzing him, swinging and brawling in the pocket, then he has got a good chance of winning the fight. But in my opinion, that's not how Benoit Saint Dennis fights. And you're not going to like what I'm going to say here because it was his debut fight. But I'm sorry, I have to bring up this fight. Yes, it was at welterweight, and that's a completely different weight class to lightweight. Like, it's not a big welterweight. But it was the habits and tendencies that he did in this fight, what I'm seeing him do in other fights, making me worried against Dustin Poirier. For example, you'll notice with Benoit Saint Dennis, he pressures so heavy to the point where when you pressure so much, a bit like Michael Chandler, you tend not to move your head because you're so close in the pocket and you're trying to brawl. You can pressure and move your head, but you can't be brawling at the same time. Brawling is the idea of swinging heavy punches towards your opponent, trying to knock them out. So you're not really worried about where your head's positioned. So that's why you saw, forget about the weight for a minute, Alexiel Zaleski was able to counter him by just staying on the back foot, being more composed and waiting for him to throw a hook from his hip and then decide to throw his own strike, which would then hurt Benoit Saint Dennis. And I think that's something that Poirier will do perfectly. Like, look at that fight with Poirier and Michael Chandler. Poirier can tend to start off quite slow at times and be on the back foot, but what he will do is have good defense whilst he's on the back foot. So you won't really see him applying the volume earlier on in the fight. You can see Benoit Saint Dennis trying to pressure him forward, starting to kick the body of Dustin Poirier. But because I believe Dustin Poirier, he is a southpaw. And when you're a southpaw and you come up against another southpaw, it is going to be very hard to throw the kicks the way how he does it, because Benoit Saint Dennis, you don't really see him throw a lot of lead leg kicks. A lot of the kicks come from the rear leg, and it works against these orthodox fighters like it worked against, I keep forgetting their names, it makes me think I have CTE. Thiago Moises, it worked against Ismail Bonfim, and it obviously worked against Matt Frivola, shadow round him. But the reason it works is because of the orthodox stance, because look at how far away their front leg is to Benoit Saint Denis' rear leg. So it opens up that part of the body so we can start kicking the body and then building up to the wrist and then essentially building up to the head kick. And I think that's what you will see when he fights against Poirier, but it won't work as effectively. One, because if you try and kick Poirier in that type of way, because his leg is going to be closer to the rear leg of Benoit Saint Denis, he's probably going to be forced to try and throw more of that lead leg, because if Poirier is a southpaw, think of it, and he's very close to him, it's going to be hard to get that leg and try and bring it back and whack it into the side of Dustin Poirier's head. When Gaethje did it, it was off the orthodox stance. And throwing with your lead leg kick, you can generate power, but nowhere near as much as off that rear leg. And I think that will be more of a mental factor when he's fighting against him, because Poirier, he can pressure, but I think he's going to try and counter strike and use that Philly shell. And especially after being head kicked, you might think, oh, it's going to happen against Saint Denis because he throws with a lot of volume. What I will say about the fight with him and Matt Frivola is, Matt Frivola, I don't know what he was thinking after he got up from the ground. If a guy's throwing so many head kicks, you don't get up and leave your hands down. Your hands need to be up, or you need to be pressuring him and not allowing him space to throw the kicks. I believe Poirier will allow him space to throw the kicks, but I don't think he's going to be able to land them the way how Gaethje landed them, or the way how he likes to land them, due to the fact of Poirier being in that southpaw stance. And that being said, I think he's going to start throwing with the hands a bit more than we see with the legs, and that's going to be the detriment of him, because yes, he can grapple, and you could say that Poirier's takedown defense, it's not amazing, it's not extremely bad, but it's not that great. So he could take advantage of that, like we saw in the Michael Chandler fight. But Michael Chandler, he fights a bit like Benoit Saint Dennis. I mean, vice versa. Saint Dennis fights a little bit like Chandler, but with more kicks. And if he can use the takedowns from setting up his hands and then waiting for Poirier to lift his hands up to do the Philly shell, and then shooting him for a double leg and taking him down to the ground, then he can have some very good success. But I think that's going to be hard to do, because he's going to keep marching him down, looking to strike. And because Poirier has actually got quite good footwork and he's got head movement, unlike Benoit Saint Dennis, I think he's going to make Benoit Saint Dennis look a bit silly at times and rock him and put him all over the place like Aleksei Zaleski. But the difference is, with Poirier, his counters are way more effective than Aleksei Zaleski, because you might think that Aleksei Zaleski has power and he was in a heavier weight class, but remember, he's not going to weigh as much in the lightweight fight compared to how much he did against Zaleski. So think about the power of Poirier. He applies volume with power. Aleksei's not a volume and then power. He's more of a power, but because he hurt Benoit Saint Dennis badly, his volume output ended up being high because he became a punch bag. And you have people like Daniel Cormier like, stop the fight! You know, like how Dan Hardy was getting like really angry against Jai Herbert and Francisco Trinaldo. I think Poirier should be able to get this done in the third round or get a decision, due to the fact that Benoit Saint Dennis is not moving his head. Poirier lands a lot of volume, and so can Benoit Saint Dennis, but that's earlier on. This is a 5-round fight. In a 3-round fight, I think it becomes a little bit more 50-50. But as of right now, in my opinion, it should be 70-30. But if you actually look at what people are voting already, they actually have Benoit Saint Dennis winning the fight. And I believe Benoit Saint Dennis is going to be a favourite against Poirier. And that's surprising to me. It really is. Because I don't think Benoit Saint Dennis, I'm not going to use the word like fraud checked or anything, because he's not. He's beating guys who, they're not ranked, but they're fighters who could be ranked in the future and are very good. And he's either knocking them out, maybe he might submit them, maybe he might ground and pound them, all that type of stuff. And he has pretty much got everything apart from his striking defense. And also, Poirier is going to be 35 years old going into the fight, which is why I can see why you think Benoit Saint Dennis should beat him, because there is another stat, and I know you shouldn't really use MMA math, but this stat here, there is a 64% chance that the fighter wins when there's a 6 years age gap. And obviously that's just a stat. It doesn't really mean much, but that's probably why I think they've got him as the favourite going into this fight, because of the age, and he's coming off the knockout loss, and he's coming up against a guy who likes to throw the head kicks. But like I've mentioned before, I don't think the head kicks are going to be as effective in a fight like this, considering the fact that Poirier is a southpaw and he's coming against a southpaw who likes to throw with rear head kicks, and that's so much harder to do when your opponent is in the southpaw stance compared to the opposite stance. So this, in my opinion, will be an entertaining fight, because I don't think it's going to go to a decision deep down. But I've just changed my mind. Benoit Saint Dennis is way too aggressive to make it to a decision. He's got a granite chin, but when you get into the later rounds, look at how tired he got in that Zaleski fight. And you're going to be like, it was his debut, look at how well he's doing now. Yeah, he's doing well now, but this is against Dustin Poirier, who's been in the top 5 for a long time now. And he's breaking through, and I just think it's a bit too early for him to come up against a guy like this and expect to just steamroll him by taking him down or submitting him. Because I don't think that's just how he will fight. He's very aggressive with the striking. He doesn't always just rely on the takedown. So I do think Poirier will win this fight via TKO, as Benoit Saint Dennis gets tired and wear down from Dustin Poirier's boxing and countering him over and over and over again. So yeah, that's what I think is going to happen. Thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.